You can just tell how desperate CEOs are getting at trying to make people like AI, because a lot is riding on the general populace liking AI due to how much money is being invested in this technology. Not long ago, we saw Microsoft CEO tell people that we need to move past calling AI slop. Specifically, in his blog post, he said, "We need to get beyond the arguments of slop versus sophistication and develop a new equilibrium in terms of our theory of the mind that accounts for humans being equipped with these new cognitive amplifier tools as we relate to each other." It's funny that he calls AI cognitive amplifiers when there's research out there showing that AI actually degrades your cognitive functions due to the fact that, well, I mean, you don't have to do any critical thinking because all you do is type a prompt and have everything done for you. But yeah, Microsoft CEO's plea to stop calling AI slop has fallen under deaf ears, and it's resulted in this CEO being brutally mocked online. As you can see right here, people are utterly refusing and also countering by calling Microsoft microslop with how much they've been leaning into AI. Tweets like these are going viral. Somebody posting, "No, I don't think I will stop calling AI slop," garnering, millions of views and tens of thousands of likes. And then among the most viral tweets is this one right here saying, "Snake oil salesman would like you to stop calling it snake oil in 2026. And I've talked ad nauseum about all of the ways in which AI has negatively impacted society, from the increase in price for consumer electronics due to the extreme shortage caused by AI companies hoarding all of the components like RAM. You've got all of the negative environmental impact like, water and electricity that's consumed, all of the deep fakes and misinformation that's spreading, all of the art that's getting stolen and being fed into generative AI, how humans are being replaced by AI that does tasks worse than humans. And then there is the fact that AI just doesn't quite work. Its quality output is pretty bad, and it often is unreliable in more ways than one. Microsoft's own Copilot, for example, has recently been blamed for intelligence mistakes when intelligence tried to rely on artificial intelligence rather than human intelligence. We've seen people try to use Windows Copilot in day-to-day to navigate their computer, but it's only made the computer feel incompetent, with Microsoft's AI often getting information wrong or not registering what users want when an AI is asked to do a task. And then there's security concerns like the fact that AI often hallucinates and can fall for attacks. In fact, just a couple hours ago, a report released talking about how Microsoft Copilot vulnerability allowed attackers to quietly steal your personal data with a single click through a very specific exploit within Microsoft's own Copilot AI, so on and so forth. So yeah, the general sentiment has been, we'll stop calling it slop when it stops being slop. And now we have another CEO chiming in on the conversation of artificial intelligence and the negative optics surrounding it. Nvidia's own CEO. Jensen Huang recently did this interview with this YouTube channel, No Priors, and he talked about how he believes AI will kind of proliferate throughout the world as time goes on. And what he had to say is not something that's been well received. In particular, the bit where he talked about how well-respected people criticizing AI has been negatively impactful to AI and in turn society. Here's the exact quote that people have been talking about. "I think we have done a lot of damage with very well-respected people who have painted a doomer narrative, end-of-the-world narrative, science fiction narrative. I appreciate that many of us grew up and enjoyed science fiction, but it's not helpful. It's not helpful to people. It's not helpful to the industry. It's not helpful to society. It's not helpful to the government. There are many people in the government who obviously aren't as familiar with and as comfortable with the technology, and when PhDs of this and CEOs of that go to governments and describe these end-of-the-world scenarios and extremely dystopian future, you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of that narrative? What are their intentions? Why are they talking to governments about these things to create regulations to suffocate startups? For what reason would they be doing that? Doomer narrative implies that people seeing AI in a negative light and seeing its negative impact on society are all essentially exaggerating, that they're engaging in conspiracy theories based on fictional scenarios, minimizing the real potential consequences of this technology being as powerful as it is if it falls in the wrong hands, if it's used for the wrong purposes, and if regulations and checks and balances aren't put in place to ensure that this technology is not abused. Except these are not just narratives. We're not talking about concepts from science fiction. We're talking about things that are becoming reality. Just because science fiction predicted the future doesn't negate that future simply because it was in a science fiction story. Fiction is often based on reality, and people who are smart and who engage in these kinds of narratives often can see into the future a little bit. They have an idea of what we can expect. Hell, I mean, Kojima and Metal Gear Solid 2 and the way that basically predicted modern society with the proliferation of digital information and misinformation and artificial intelligence. Hell, Death Stranding practically predicted COVID and social isolation and all of these things. It doesn't negate the realities that those things did happen in our real world. The fact that AI is destroying the environment is not fiction. The fact that AI is stealing people's art, stealing people's appearances, and then misrepresenting them. The fact that misinformation is spreading through AI. The fact that humans are being replaced for AI and doing a worse job than humans. And the fact that corporations' greed for AI and how potentially lucrative this business venture could be has caused the hoarding of consumer components that has led to consumers being screwed over financially and economically. None of that stuff is fiction. That's literally happening. And we need well-respected people, people with knowledge, people with the ability to critically think and who don't have, millions to billions of dollars riding on the success of a potentially destructive technology to be able to objectively look at things and be able to express their opinions and criticize the technology that sure can be used for beneficial purposes, but can also be abused, especially by corporations who care more about the profiting from AI rather than how this technology is utilized for beneficial purposes. And so, the general vibe on social media has been to dunk on Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang for saying these things. Scrolling down through the comment section of this post, for example, you'll have people saying things like, guys, we can't sell people a destructive product that doesn't work if educated experts keep telling people it's destructive and doesn't work. It's a CEO trying to present the notion that the current narratives surrounding AI are all false, are all over-exaggerated, and are doomer narratives, essentially trying to dismiss the reality of the destructive aspects of AI and trying to essentially paint the people who criticize AI and do it objectively through facts and through just the reality of what's happening as people who cannot be relied on. Presenting them as people who are just trying to stifle innovation when they're plain and simply presenting cautionary tales of what could happen if this technology goes unchecked. It feels like CEOs are actively trying to prevent people from being educated about the current realities of how AI is impacting our world and how it will impact our world in the future if left unfettered. Here's another top comment saying, LOL, all the big tech CEOs are complaining about how the public views AI. Please don't call it slop or criticize it. We're so very heavily invested. We need this to work out is pretty much right. That's exactly what's going on with the way CEOs are not trying to engage in conversation, but rather shut it down and say that we need to move past conversations surrounding slop, that we need to stop having well-educated people trying to present, doomer narratives. And then going to the quote tweets, you'll find even more viral posts. For example, right here we have this individual with, over 33,000 likes and hundreds of thousands of views who said, as a mock quote from Jensen Huang, "We made everything worse for the average person, but you shouldn't be mean to us." Here's another top post I think makes a great point here. This one has, over 60,000 likes and almost 1 million views. Because once people start realizing that intellectuals also criticize AI, framing them as people stuck in the past no longer works. What CEOs are afraid of is that people with credibility will criticize AI because that will diminish the credibility of CEOs who are presenting AI as the be-all, end-all, the technology that will make everyone's lives better. And if credible, well-respected people start fighting back against these CEO statements, then a CEO's ability to attempt to spread false narrative that will benefit the corporation and its investments will fall apart. What these CEOs seem to be afraid of more than anything is that people will get educated. Because if they get educated, that means that they'll actually see the reality of this technology, a reality that they want to hide because reality is not profitable. They would much rather manipulate you and gaslight you into thinking that the CEOs know better. And they're afraid of, well-respected experts and, people who are credible speaking out because that means that their ability to gaslight and manipulate the masses diminishes. Everything that these CEOs are saying to protect AI at all costs, it's all for the sake of the corporation. It's all for the sake of their own investment. They don't actually care about people. Because if they did, they would at the very least acknowledge that the concerns surrounding AI are very real, and they wouldn't ask us to just move past the argument of slop. They wouldn't say things like well-respected people having arguments and criticisms against AI has done a lot of damage and that it's something we shouldn't pay mind to. Here's another response that I think puts it aptly, saying it's not a doomer narrative, it's just reality. Gen AI harms via stolen work, impacts livelihoods and environment, psychosis, deepfakes, CSAM, decrease in brain functions, increased utilities and hardware prices, etc., make it so people are no longer falling for the snake oil because people are genuinely starting to see and feel the negative impacts of the bad uses of AI. Even folks like Gamers Nexus, who's a big tech content creator, had this to say about Jensen Huang: man who powers global surveillance and war profiteer says other people are harming society. Referring to headlines like this one, Jensen Huang says relentless negativity around AI is hurting society and has done a lot of damage. And this is coming from someone who's met Jensen Huang personally when, this company was focused more on GPUs and gaming and stuff that actually benefits society, that gives people, something joyful to look forward to. And now that's become secondary to trying to power artificial intelligence. And it's just sad to see the fall of Nvidia, the way they've reprioritized so drastically and dramatically and just completely screwed over the customers who made the company what it is today. Instead of trying to help the current shortage and inflation of consumer electronics, Jensen Huang is practically contributing to it. I mean, things are so bad right now on that front. We literally have news with headlines like this one: South Korean design office hit by a thief who only stole DDR5 memory. Or, RAM shortages have gone so crazy that thieves are now pulling memory sticks out of PCs instead of stealing the whole machine. RAM is just a lot more portable, and RAM is now worth as much as PCs these days. This headline continues: in one case, a thief broke into an office and stole 4 32-gigabyte Micron memory sticks by smashing tempered glass of PC case. They probably made a few $1,000 right there. All this is a result of corporate greed and a gold rush for this new AI venture, this new AI horizon. I mean, this tweet right here really sums it up best. The reason why RAM has become 4 times more expensive is that a huge amount of RAM that has not yet been produced was purchased with non-existent money to be installed in GPUs that also have not yet been produced in order to place them in data centers that have not yet been built, powered by infrastructure that may never happen, to satisfy demand that does not actually exist, and to obtain profit that is mathematically impossible. Here's a response where somebody added to this by saying this is the cleanest summary of the AI hardware bubble. We're prepaying for a future supply chain, future workloads, and future profits that may never converge. It's not RAM scarcity, it's speculative coordination failure at industrial scale. This summarizes the whole situation where OpenAI made deals that hoarded up a bunch of RAM from Samsung and SK Hynix, combined with Micron now exiting the consumer business, and this snowballing into what it is today. And then all the other AI companies saw what OpenAI is doing, and they felt the need to hoard RAM, and then consumer electronics companies saw that RAM was being hoarded, so they also felt the need to hoard RAM, and then consumers saw what was happening, and they also felt the need to hoard RAM. But eventually all of the RAM that was sold for cheaper will run out, and all of the RAM eventually will become at the price that they are now, which is quadruple what they normally should be. And at that point, all industrial and consumer electronics across the globe will become far more expensive. But sure, let's insist that we move past the conversation of AI slop, and let's insist that well-respected and educated people raising concerns about AI is somehow bad for society. Sure, Satya Nadella, let's talk about notions of building community-first AI infrastructure when you're screwing over the community. Satya Nadella continues to try to promote AI as a positive thing, but it's causing the opposite effect, with Windows Central reporting here that Microsoft is finding itself mocked as it claims to build community-first AI data centers as AI products continue to destroy jobs, pollute the climate, and generate non-consensual nude deepfakes. But yeah, sure, it's all doomer narrative. It's all science fiction that has no meaning or merit. At least some consumer electronic companies are saying something sensible, like Dell here straight up said that what we have learned over the course of this year from a consumer perspective is they're not buying based on AI. In fact, I think AI probably confuses them more than it helps them understand a specific product. And so yeah, as the more egregious use cases of AI become more stigmatized, hopefully this is a mentality that other companies will eventually adopt, especially as backlash gets worse surrounding those specific uses of AI that are more abusive and detrimental to society not beneficial. And that way we can weed out the good uses of AI from the rubble and have those take the spotlight and those be reinforced, and have the negative, the less ideal, the more egregious uses of AI fall by the wayside. But I suppose only time will tell how all this will play out. But right now, yeah, all of the CEOs speaking in favor of AI and trying to shut down conversation and criticism and deny the realities of the negative impact of this technology that's so heavily invested in, that they need the narrative surrounding it to be positive. All of that is ultimately pissing people off more and only helping spread the narrative that AI isn't good. When CEOs are this desperate to try to convince people of a narrative, you know that, the backlash is on the right track. But again, that's just one man's take. I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on CEO statements surrounding AI in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.